such a great response today. It was amazing to see all the answers that were coming in during the mashup game. But just looking at the answers, I know it's going to be a very tough competition. So I'm really looking forward to the final solution that everyone comes up with, and also looking for the next week. So I hope it is interesting and it's a fun competition for everyone.
Hello, everyone. Great to see so many of you here today. My name is Shu Shen. I'm a coach and co-founder of Aki Singapore. I'm super excited to be your host today. And on behalf of Temasek Ecosparities Platform and Aki Singapore, I want to welcome all of you to this second workshop of Sustainacity Urban Innovation Challenge. We are thrilled to have you all joining from so many countries, Singapore and our ASEAN neighbors, friends in India, Australia, Europe, Africa, and all the way in North America. Thanks for staying up late, and thank you all for being part of this exciting journey. I hope by now you have already started your ideation process and have gathered a few ideas for your potential solution. Because today, our Aki coach is going to take you to the next step of your design process, that is rapid prototyping. It's about building out your ideas quickly, making them tangible, visible, and most importantly, shareable for feedback. This way, in a short time, you know what's working and what needs improvement. And today, we are also honored to have two very important industry leaders with us. Tana Sullivan, the Group Head of Sustainability at Gotoh, which is Indonesia's largest digital consumer platform. And Bjorn Loh, the Executive Director and co-founder of Edible Garden City, a social enterprise in Singapore that champions the Grow Your Own Food movement in cities around the world. So they'll be sharing insights on how they and their companies have successfully introduced smart sustainability initiatives that now play an important role in driving our goal towards a net zero city. But that's not before going through their own design journey and rounds of tests to ensure that the end users and ultimately the environment will benefit. So stay close, it's happening soon. You can ask questions throughout the session for our speakers as well as coaches, which we will try to answer as many as we can along the way. So remember to log into Slido to post your questions there. All right? And now let's have a think. E-commerce and ride-hailing have become an integral part of modern societies. For many of us out there, we are increasingly reliant on these services for our daily needs. The thing is, these conveniences have huge consequences for our planet. Online shopping is contributing to escalating packaging waste and rising emissions from delivery, just as ride-hailing is. And these needs now throw up new challenges on how we build new era businesses that can be responsible, sustainable, and viable. In Asia, we are no short of mega e-commerce platforms or super apps, just like the rest of the world. And now, Gotoh is Indonesia's largest go-to ecosystems for the people's daily needs, from e-commerce to on-demand and financial services. It is also one of the most valuable technology groups in Southeast Asia. So for a company this size, it has a huge part to play in steering the sustainability efforts of the country, in fact, the region, towards a net zero outcome. So how did they do it? I'm delighted to introduce Tana Sullivan from Gotoh once again. Tana leads the environmental, social, and governance efforts across Gotoh's business arms, which include Gojek, Gotoh Financial, and Tokopedia, Indonesia's largest e-commerce platform. And before Gotoh, Tana was with the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. She led the partnerships for sustainability-focused initiatives in ASEAN and globally, and also championed the forum's efforts on issues including energy transition, circular economy, and deforestation, just to name a few. We have so much to learn from her. So now everyone, please join me to welcome Tana Sullivan.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Tana.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today, Tana. I'll just give you a quick heads up. Our participants here are a real force of very passionate youth, eager to make a positive change to the environment and society. So what can you tell them? Please take it away.
This is a huge responsibility. I don't know if I can cover everything in just the session that we have, but look, I'm just so incredibly excited and honored to be here sharing with you all, hopefully, what might be some interesting things to learn from the successes, but also some of the failures and mistakes that we've made, because it has very much been a combination of both learnings as well as successes. So we're very excited about our journey ahead, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share more with you. With that, shall I go straight into it? Are we excited about learning about what GoTo does? Great. Okay, so look, I'm going to do just this very informal, we're going to keep it very informal, introduction to GoTo, and then specifically what we're doing from a sustainability standpoint. I want to be able to share some of the very practical things we've done as a company. And so please, if there are any questions or comments, don't even hesitate. I'm sure the organizers, who are very highly organized, are on top of that. But I look forward to receiving all kinds of questions. Don't just give me the easy ones. I can take the hard ones as well. Look, so introduction to GoTo Group. For those of you who are not familiar with it, we are, as mentioned, we are the largest digital ecosystem in Indonesia. We're one of the largest regional tech players in Southeast Asia, and we cover everything from financial services to on-demand services to e-commerce and logistics. I'm going to share some data points to give you just a sense of the scale, because you can read on the screen for yourselves about what our business lines are. But look, we have around 17 million micro SMEs on our platform. 96% of the companies or the businesses that we work with are micro and small and medium-sized enterprises. We have around almost, I think now, 60 million annual transacting users. We have 2.7 million driver partners. And on average, out of all of our users on our platform, they're spending around 25% of their monthly income on our platform. And we contribute, the University of Indonesia just released a study 2 weeks ago, and we contributed around 2% of Indonesia's GDP last year. So this is a huge scale we're talking about. And sometimes we even have to remember the scale that we're, because it's very easy to forget when you're just sitting in front of your laptop, you know, in an office space in Jakarta, of just how extensive our reach is. We deploy around 1 million packages a day on the e-commerce side. We did around 2.7 billion transactions in 2022. And so again, this is just an incredibly rich ecosystem that we have of driver partners, of merchants, of users, of civil society representatives, of our employees, our leaders. And so I think it's just incredibly, it's a point that I love to make over and over again. What our company stands for, the purpose that we have, has been built in from inception. By the very nature of our business model, we provide access to the digital economy for all those millions of people, whether they are users, whether they are the driver partners, whether they are the merchants. And the idea for us is really that we are the facilitating platform to allow a micro SME in Lombok be able to sell to a consumer in Aceh. And provide the end-to-end system for them, or value chain for them, to be able to do that in a seamless, cost-effective way. So where do I come in for all of this? So look, sustainability is my heart and soul. I joined Gojek originally almost 3 years ago to set up the sustainability function. And this is where all of these kind of world-class ambitions that GoTo has as a company comes into play. It is incredibly important today and in the future for all companies to be able to demonstrate how they're making a positive impact from an environmental, from a social, and from an economic standpoint. And so this is really what I've spent the better part of the last 3 years doing, is building what I call the operational transitions of the company, so that by default, organically, all of the business lines in GoTo Group, of which we have many, are going to be, can I say naturally, shifting towards more positive economic, environmental, and social practices, and then verifying them and getting those measured and credibly kind of impartially verified by third parties. And that last part, I think, is also very, very important. So how did we prioritize what we committed to as a company? We spent over 100 hours talking to all of those stakeholders I mentioned before. All of them have different perspectives, all of them come from different backgrounds. And so the idea for us is to understand from their perspective, what was actually the most important or material sustainability challenge that, one, was impacting themselves, and then two, where they thought we could have the most impact on as a company if we took action on it. And this is where you get our 3 zeros. So here we have zero emissions, zero waste, and zero barriers. And these are our 3 zero commitments by 2030. Zero emissions, you'd be very hard pressed to find a company today that isn't impacted by climate action or has made
because
some
you don't
kind
have
of
to be in the eyes
commitment.
of others, right? You scared that you're afraid of the judgment, right?
I think we
But
have
there's no
some
judgment.
noise coming through. Okay. Yes, who hasn't made a commitment or some kind of target towards decarbonization. And so for us, what this looks like, we spent the first 2 years doing a thorough emissions inventory. Almost 88% of our inventory is actually from the mobility happening on our platform, which is why, as part of our zero emissions commitment, we actually also have set a target of 100% electric vehicles by 2030. We're already 100% renewable energy powered in terms of our offices and direct operations. We will expand that across to the big enterprises working on our platform. And we hope to also influence and inspire others in Indonesia to also do the same. So those are kind of the 2 big areas we look at for zero emissions. For zero waste, I mentioned 1 million packages a day, that's just in Indonesia alone. So you can let your imaginations run wild in terms of just how much packaging that involves. Now, this is where it gets very complicated, because only a very small percentage of that comes out of our fulfillment centers. We don't manufacture any goods, which means that we have to work with our suppliers, and in a lot of the cases, they're at big FMCG companies, to then try and, what I call, turn off the tap in terms of the materials they're using for packaging that then gets brought to our fulfillment centers. The more complicated part of the kind of equation is the 96% of merchants on our platform that sell directly to consumers. And as I mentioned before, they're micro or small sized enterprises. And what that means is that we have to make sure that if we are to set a target around packaging and waste, we have to make sure that there are credible quality solutions and alternatives that doesn't shift the burden of cost or responsibility over to the merchants. And what I mean by that is, for us, we've spent already now almost 2 years straight testing different kinds of packaging solutions, both for food and for products, and started piloting a lot of them in the actual operations of the merchants that we work with. And once we're confident that these are cost-effective and, as I mentioned, credible alternatives, then we can start offering them to scale them across our merchant base as well. The third one is around zero barriers. This is about our economic impact, our socioeconomic impact, to be precise. As I mentioned before, by our very nature, we provide access to the digital economy for millions and millions of our stakeholders. So for us, it's how we can more systematically and strategically improve the livelihoods of all of those who operate, who depend on, who use our platform every day. Right now, the priority has been largely on our driver partners and how we can really prove that we are actually a positive force in the Indonesian economy and in the other economies where we operate in Southeast Asia, as well as we provide equal opportunities for our merchants to be able to not just access economic opportunities on our platform, but also be able to thrive, so they're not just surviving on a day-to-day basis. I already went into some detail and I realized I've been talking a lot, but this is very exciting. It's all very exciting, of course. It's my job. But on zero emissions, as I mentioned before, we're transitioning 100% of our vehicles over to electric bikes. I say bikes because almost 96% again of our fleet, of our driver partner fleet, is actually two-wheelers. And if you've been to Indonesia, then you will know we are largely a bike economy. And so for us, the goal here is to help provide alternatives and options that are cost effective and meet the needs of our driver partners. And why I say that is because if you look at an electric bike today versus a conventional bike, there's around a 30 to 40 to sometimes 50% premium. And this target, by the way, is our company's target. It's not the driver's target. And so what did we do to respond to that? We actually set up a joint venture called Electrum, which will start to produce its own bikes next year. And the goal is really to onshore manufacturing of electric bikes in Indonesia, because for us, our hypothesis is that that will actually bring down the cost of the bike itself, as well as us having obviously a lot of data from the drivers' behaviors and input from their feedback and focus group discussions so that we can ensure that we're building a product that meets their needs. But of course, the idea is not to force them to do it. It's that we are actually providing a high quality option that they'll then make an informed decision about themselves to transition themselves over to electric bikes. As I mentioned, we're already 100% renewable energy now for our offices. We hope hope is the wrong word. We aim to scale that across all of our operations, which includes our fulfillment centers and facilities like our cloud kitchens as well by the end of the year. We've done some neat little things on the platform itself that you wouldn't see from the front end, but in the back end, it's things like route optimization. So what that looks like is order pooling for some of the food delivery or the e-commerce deliveries. What it looks like also is making sure that drivers are taking actually the shortest and lowest emitting routes. And that's already built into the back end of that. We also have an in-house dashboard where we can track our emissions inventory every single day, so we know where we're at in terms of this time last year, and also where we need to get to make sure that every year we're actually getting closer to zero from an emissions standpoint. And then the last one, which comes with a lot of caveats, which I won't mention here, but look, offsetting, yes, we do offer an offsetting feature in the platform for all of the transport and food delivery orders. However, we don't calculate those in our inventory and our reduction efforts. Why? For us, it's kind of, I guess, residual emissions that we would be looking at offsetting for, which we haven't started yet, because our priority and our focus is to invest everything in actually shifting our operations over to lower emissions. And then facilitating all of the partners in our ecosystem to do the same. These are operational shifts and transitions we're making, as I mentioned, and that's where the heavy lifting comes from. For us, it's not a matter of just purchasing carbon credits and being able to say that we've done our job. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. All right, zero waste. I'm gonna try to speed this up so it's a little bit more engaging for all of you. But look, the very basic principle of zero waste is try and reduce the amount of new material coming into our ecosystem. And then on the downstream side, try and repurpose and really properly set a value on material before it becomes waste. So what I mean by that is we don't know what consumers are actually throwing away. And so for us, it's how can we provide solutions working with waste management partners and other types of exciting ventures with, including startups that have great solutions for how to repurpose waste material. We've spent the last year already testing some of those out in our offices. Right now, all of our offices are 100% diversion from landfill, so there's no waste going to landfill from our offices. And out of that waste that's been diverted, we've actually converted it into things like industrial cleaners that we're using in our own offices. We're also repurposing a lot of the cardboard packaging into, new recycled, 100% recycled packaging that's FSC certified. I've been able to reduce a lot of our operational expenses as well. So that's what when you hear circular economy, that's really what it is in practice. It's for us, it's having material that's already in our value chain or already in our ecosystem that we're able to then reuse, repurpose, resell. Our merchants in our cloud kitchens now resell their used cooking oil over to vendors and partners that we work with, which is then converted to biofuels. So there's a lot of exciting things happening, especially in a market like Indonesia and Southeast Asia. And so we're really excited to be able to test and iterate some of those solutions with our partners, and our stakeholders, of course. That's that on zero waste. Zero barriers. All right. So this one is the probably hairiest of them all, if I can say that. When you talk about environmental impact like emissions and waste, it's pretty straightforward. It's not simple, but it's straightforward. You can calculate, it's tangible. There's very clear methodology and guidelines and frameworks around how to account for a lot of these things. When it comes to socioeconomic impact, it's not so clear cut. What I mean by that is, when I came into the company, when I came into Gojek, at the time, there was a lot of criticism about platform and ride-hailing companies in particular and driver partners. So can we prove that drivers are better off because we exist? Now, in a country like Indonesia, it's very different than what it might be in Singapore or in other more advanced markets. And by the way, we've done a lot of research and interviews and consultations, even with our global peers on this. Most of our drivers are dependent on our platform for their income. Unlike in other countries where you might see Uber or Lyft drivers, for example, where they are, part-time drivers and they can earn sources of income from other places. For our drivers on the Gojek side, 76% of them are actually 100% dependent on our platform for their income, which to me increases the responsibility we have as a company to ensure that they can earn what I call sustainable livelihoods, that they're not just one emergency bill away from falling below the poverty line, from not being able to pay for their kids to go to school, for not being able to sustain their homes. And so this is something that's very, very important to us. And so the types of things that we've been doing is actually working with the financial institutions in Indonesia to be able to start opening up access to our driver partners for financial products and services that are non-predatory. And what I mean by that, it's that we're not trying to gouge the drivers. We actually want them to be able to make informed decisions about their financial well-being. First, they have to understand what that means. So trainings and workshops and sessions in person, offline, around financial literacy to help boost that for them, as well as work with these financial institutions so that they also trust the drivers. Because remember, a lot of these drivers do not have, let's say, an online presence, nor do they have actual access to financial services. And so that's what we're really aiming to do, is open up that access to them. So in December, we launched a driver credit scoring system. We did that in partnership with the World Bank, who worked with us over 9 months to develop the right criteria and indicators for our drivers, and then share that with some of the biggest state-owned enterprises, state-owned banks in Indonesia, so that they would provide things like microloans and lines of credit to the drivers that are, as I mentioned before, non-predatory. The next stage of that is more longer-term products, like things supporting or bolstering the government's pension scheme, because drivers actually fall between the cracks as it relates to that. So that's on the financial inclusion side. We also have things around diversity and inclusion that's within our organization, but also across our ecosystem, as well as in-app features that we're standardizing across our apps to make sure that those that are visually impaired, hearing impaired can still use and earn a living on our platform without any barriers whatsoever. And with that, that is actually the end of my presentation. I'm sorry I went over time.
No, not at all. Thank you, Tana. Thank you so much for the sharing. Very insightful. And now I'm sure our audience are curious, have some curious questions for you. So let's see what they are asking. Okay. Let's go for the first one. Please shed some more light on zero barriers. How is it leading towards ESG? as it looks more towards better operational. The previous question.
Yeah, okay.
Towards better operational efficiency due to economies of scale.
Okay, so more light on zero barriers. I mean, look, there's a couple of the focus pillars for zero barriers as I just mentioned, it's financial inclusion for our partners, so both the drivers and the merchants, as well as accessibility, both within our and diversity and inclusion efforts, both within our organization, on our platforms, and across our ecosystem. So this is the S part of ESG. So this is the kinds of metrics and indicators that we're responding to that are very clearly outlined if you look at a lot of the reporting standards that are most used by global companies. Now, look, we don't do these things to have a very fancy, shiny report. This is not a check the box exercise for us. However, you do have to check the box when it comes to things. There are some very clear regulations here in Indonesia. We are now a publicly listed company. We have to produce a sustainability report or an ESG report every year in line with the Financial Services Authority's guidelines or requirements, sorry. We also, for the last 3 years, have produced a sustainability report that is completely audited, so assured independently, and also in line with international reporting standards. And so the S part of that actually also covers things like labor policy, codes of conduct, not just for you as a company, but also for our vendors as well and the partners that we work with. And it's a whole kind of box of different things, but at the very heart of it, it's how you're doing good for the people that depend on your company or your ecosystem, or part of it. And so that's really all the different angles, I guess, that we could cover from a zero barriers standpoint and how it relates to overall our ESG performance.
Thank you, Tana. Let's explore the second question. Will GoTo release the emission reports to the public? And besides packaging, what other steps is GoTo taking to help the small, medium, the micro enterprises decarbonize their operations?
The great question, Felix. Questions. So the first one, you can actually already see our emissions inventory from 2021. We published that in the 2022 report. We just finished the 2022 report, which will be published by the end of this month, which will have our updated inventory from last year. So you'll be able to see all of the inventory related data in there if you want to, if you'd like to refer to it. It'll make great bedtime or weekend reading, I'm sure. But yes, the inventory is there. And I actually forgot what the second part of the, oh, there it is. Other steps to take in for MSMEs. Look, I think on the emissions front, we actually focus mostly on the big enterprises. And the reason I say that is because for us to ensure that our merchants are also shifting or decarbonizing their own operations, renewable energy is probably the crux of it. And it still comes at around a 2.5% to 3% premium here in Indonesia to shift over to renewable energy. And so again, if you look at all the things that we've done, and kind of one of the threads that I've alluded to but not mentioned explicitly is we really, all of these things, there's still a green premium, green or purple or pink. I think there's different colors now, but there's still a premium associated with shifting towards more sustainable practices as a business, and then of course as an ecosystem. And so because zero barriers is also part of our commitments and our priorities, because we understand the challenges that our merchants and our driver partners face on a daily basis, for us to add an additional burden of responsibility, an additional burden of cost to them, it's non-negotiable. We will not do that. And so that's why we work so hard and invest so much as a company to be able to test and iterate and pilot a lot of these solutions ourselves first. In the hope that, well, not, I shouldn't say hope because we shouldn't be hopeful. It's past that time now. We just need to do it, right? We need to get to a point where there is no more premium, and there shouldn't be. I mean, with any of the examples I provided before, Indonesia in particular is a natural resource-rich country. We have access to a lot of exciting, innovative solutions and also a huge supply of natural resources that can actually support some of the priorities that we have, especially from the environmental standpoint. And it wasn't so long ago that even I, in my living memory, remember, my going to the market with my to the wet market with my grandmother and not having one plastic bag in sight. Everything was repurposed. We never threw anything away. Everything was packed in newspaper or banana leaf or what have you. And so for a lot of Indonesians, that's still in our living memory. It's just now it's now rebranded as something very sexy and trendy, and then there's a 200% price increase as a result of that. But it's actually embedded in our culture here in Indonesia to reuse all the parts of everything, and so we're really trying to also raise awareness about that. But at the same time, we recognize that for a merchant who is paying X amount for a styrofoam container, and then we come in with a home compostable advanced material packaging, and that's 8 to 10 times more per unit. Of course, we have to get that price down. And so that's why we work with a lot of these innovative startups from outside as well as locally to try and get the price down. Because for them, they actually need they're kind of still in R&D phase. And so for them, there's a lot of space to iterate and test in the sandbox that is the GoTo ecosystem. And as more solutions come into the market as well, it will be more competitive, and we anticipate the prices will also go down and the costs will also go down for this. And so for our role, it's really about bringing a lot of these credible solutions together for our merchants and then providing them with the right incentive scheme so that they do want to transition themselves over to some of these more sustainable practices. Because we want to lay out all of the options for them, give them all the information, facilitate in a seamless way in our app all of those options, and then see them actually starting to make those decisions to transition over themselves, because that's where you actually start to see the impact at scale. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you.
The next one.
That was a very comprehensive one. And I'm afraid we only have time for one last question. And here's one that with an additional vote. Why electric bikes? Electric cars? How about other options with zero emissions, such as hydrogen, biofuels? Sana.
Yeah, so look, I think when we approach any one of our challenges or our priority areas, we always kind of we do a full 360 assessment, right, of the things that are happening in the market, the things that are already present in Indonesia, the opportunities, the regulations, the support from government. And this is where electric mobility comes in. Indonesia is one of the largest producers of suppliers of nickel in the world. We don't have lithium, but we do have nickel. And so for us, I think we saw an opportunity to be able to be one of those players to facilitate the building of the electric mobility system in Indonesia, knowing that the government was also investing a lot in it, because, by the way, it's very capital intensive. But as you mentioned, I mean, electric bikes are actually not zero emission. They're low emission, but they're not zero emission. And so we saw an opportunity also with some of the partners and some of the things that were happening in other similar markets like in India or in China, where the scale and the expansion of electric mobility was just really incredible to see. And so taking some of the learnings that happen in those markets and being able to apply them in an Indonesian context, I think is what we're trying to do with Electrum. We're actually setting up a swapping system, not a charging one. The drivers take less than 1 minute to go up to a swapping station and swap out their batteries currently for their batteries for a new one. On top of that, we're seeing very positive feedback from them around the model bikes that we've tested with them so far. And they're really, really happy and pleased with it in terms of the actual product itself meeting their needs. But it doesn't mean we're eliminating any kinds of other options. And as I mentioned before, even though we have, or the idea is to have this, this EV manufacturing company within our ecosystem, we're also still working with a lot of other manufacturers to make sure that they can also have an equal chance to offer their bikes to our driver partners. And again, we want our drivers to make that choice themselves of which is the best bike for their needs, knowing that it's a superior product, because over the life cycle of an electric bike, the cost is actually lower to maintain than a conventional bike. And so this is what a lot of the things that I guess we're building together. And if you look at electric mobility itself in Indonesia, it's just a huge growing sector, and really hope to also contribute to kind of the local capacity development here in Indonesia, so that we're not just kind of an importing market anymore, we're actually value adding here as well.
Thank you. And I'm afraid that's all we have time for, teams. And Tana, just so you know, there are several more, quite a number of questions being lined up for you. And what we'll do is, everybody, teams, we will be compiling these questions. And Tana, please take a look and we'll try to feed the answers back to all of you. And another way is, if you have more questions, even more questions for Tana, you can follow her on LinkedIn to drop her a note, or you can again, write
I
down.
check it. I do check it. I promise. I will respond.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Tana. So now, everyone, please join me to give Tana a huge round of virtual applause for this very insightful session. And thanks for sharing so much with us, Tana. And that's leaving us with a lot to reflect on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Good luck, everybody. I'm so excited to see what comes out of this, and hopefully be working with many of you in the years to come. Thank you.
All right. And now we've heard a lot being shared about initiatives to reduce greenhouse gas emission in the cities. And what if we can also help to reduce transportation and production related emissions by bringing natural food sources closer to the urban consumers? Yes, we are talking about farming in the cities or urban farming. So Singapore is potentially the best case study for urban farming. Its space constraints and extreme high dependency on food imports, in fact, more than 90%, have inspired some of the most creative urban farming solutions that are catching global attention. And one of them is Edible Garden City, an urban farming social enterprise founded in Singapore. So urban farming is often seen as a case of just addressing food scarcity. Well, there's more than meets the eye. Stay close and you'll find out soon how Edible Garden City is taking several steps further to plug the concept with waste management, sustainable building design, and other pillars that make a sustainable city. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Bjorn Loh, the Executive Director and co-founder of Edible Garden City. Bjorn is a pioneer in sustainable urban food systems and has been leading the Grow Your Own Food movement in Singapore. Bjorn has a wealth of experience in creating urban agriculture solutions that help communities and businesses connect with nature, grow their own food, and build resilience in the face of environmental challenges. I'm glad to welcome Bjorn to join us. Hello, Bjorn. Very excited to have you with us today.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And Bjorn, please tell us more about the challenges that Edible Garden City is addressing and how you are driving this sustainability movement forward. Please take it away.
Thank you. I think today, because a short 15 minutes, I will try my best to kind of give you an overview of, challenges that we face globally. And a lot of these challenges are not something that is new. I think as a global community, we have faced three specific food price crises from 1950 to the present day. And every time we have a crisis globally, as we come together, we solve it using technology and scientific means to increase production. But what this does is then it really destroys the environment, and also in that sense creates livelihood losses for the small holding farmers. And today we still see that kind of food price crisis, the last with the pandemic supply chain disruptions. And if we look at the three food price crises as compared to what Singapore has experienced, we have moved along that route as well. In the 60s, we were quite self-sufficient in producing quite a number of our food sources. But as the sort of production and the globalized food system has been developed, we have shifted away from that in search for other economic futures. And today, only 1% of our land is under production. And if you look at what we do as a nation is to diversify our risks through importation of food from 170 countries. So 90% of our food comes from 170 countries. And this, whilst it keeps us as one of the food secure places, every year we throw away 700,000 tons of food per year. And this imbalance further sort of exposes itself with a study done by the Singapore Management University in 2020. 10% of Singapore households face some form of food insecurity challenges. So you can see this is quite an imbalance within the food system, and this is not an anomaly just to Singapore. If you look at all cities around the world and all countries around, there are food insecurity challenges and food waste issues as well. And so the global challenge that we face in the next decade is really, are we going to put the same solutions into place, or do we need to use new methods or new approaches to solving this food inequity issue? And there are many school of thoughts, and this is one school of thought. This similar extractive approach that will serve a systemic shift in food production, and agriculture system, can they be multifunctional and really look at local production and local food systems instead of a globalized one? So here I want to kind of share three broad practices or three principles that we have been working on to really design food systems in the city. And the first one is on extractive versus regenerative practices. If you look at this picture, this is probably back in the pre-colonial Singapore days, where a lot of the land were deforested and Gambia plantations were put in. And this very extractive approach essentially destroyed a lot of our land in a search for production, and so looking at two very different and diverse model. On the left hand side, you have one that is very extractive in its approach. It requires a lot of inputs and has high outputs. On the right, you have a more closed loop approach to food production. And when we start to explore the very extractive methods of production, you can see this picture, which shows Cameron Highlands in Malaysia, where 70% of the vegetables that are produced come to Singapore, and how it has actually degraded the land, causing land erosion, water table pollution. So the entire ethics around food and food imports, we have to question that a bit more deeply. And so as our food futures, as we look at our food futures, are we basing it purely on high-tech farming and technology, or should a more diversified approach be sought? So there are multiple alternative solutions that we've been looking at, such as permaculture, food foresting, and intercropping, and syntropic agriculture, where you are using ecosystems to develop food systems rather than using high-tech approaches. And you can see the diversity of these food production spaces. And bringing it into the city, you can also see how it can change rooftops into highly diverse food production areas. The second principle is really about centralized versus decentralized systems. If you look on the left, centralized large-scale production, which is 1,000 acres, grain farms, are highly vulnerable to disruption because if you have a flood, a natural disaster, they won't be able to get their goods out. On the right, you see a decentralized small-scale production, which is what urban agriculture has been embodied around. A lot of the spaces we designed in the early days were not built for purpose. So accessibility was a challenge, and on the rooftop, we had to crane things up. So as we work along these challenges, as we start to design them into new buildings, then there's also challenges around a mismatch in economic expectations because property owners will want to collect rental. There's a lot of greenwashing going about, and also the whole aesthetics of a farm in the city center, and what is the threshold of expectations. But we continue to look at more marginalized and underutilized land, like under this viaduct where we did farming, or transitionary spaces within spaces like in the shop house, which is not used. And we found urban agriculture really being used as a place-making tool to activate spaces and bring community together. And with the 1,000 community gardens that we have in Singapore, this located in housing estates, this could be the ideal situation for immediate food access, creating micro enterprises, and really returning back the production power back to the people. So I was going to skip this few slides. And the last principle is on production-centric versus community-centric approaches. And a lot of farms today are very, of course, production-centric because that's what they run on, producing vegetables and selling that. But a lot of these farms are then biosecure and not necessarily allowing community to engage with these spaces. When we look at agroecology approaches or regenerative agriculture practices, these farms are open for the community to come in. And what we've done in the last 10 years is really to create spaces within the city where community can come and participate to bring about this kampong spirit, really creating the transfer of knowledge of how to grow food within their own homes. And a lot of urban farms within the fabric of the urban city in Singapore practices crop diversification. So we bring back a lot of native food plants, and these rooftops become a sort of wildlife corridor for insects and birds and mammals to come by. And also it can be also presented as a soil carbon sink, because as we organically cultivate the soil, it will allow the carbon to be captured within the soil spaces in Singapore. And when we look deeper into community, a lot of the knowledge or traditional food knowledge are actually captured within the elderly generation. And how do we actually capture that before it is lost? So a lot of these spaces then bring these knowledge from the old and then impart it to the new. And one of the community groups that we have been looking at quite closely is that of the foreign migrant workers. And many of these working in Singapore come from agriculture backgrounds from their homes in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, and they come with a wealth of agricultural knowledge. And a lot of times, how do we also sort of bring them into the community to share knowledge and also to be part of the solution for our future food systems? And of course, lastly, the native knowledge, the indigenous food knowledge of Singapore, whether it's within the Orang Laut community or the Orang Pulau community, their knowledge of the environment, the ecosystem, the food plants used for medicine, for food, and their practices are no longer as widely available. And today, there are 33 Southeast Asian indigenous community. So as a group of people working in this space, we're trying to create a Southeast Asian native food strategy to really let these individuals lead the future of the design of our food systems. And farms and urban farms is not only be seen as a place of food production, as I've shared, community is one, but urban farms can also be a place to really elevate some of the social challenges that we face in the city. And over the last 10 years, we have worked with communities to offer social employment, to bring the most vulnerable into the farm, to provide them with employment, and also empower them to be part of this food system. And towards the future, as our population ages, we are starting to see more different social issues coming out, such as social isolation within the elderly. And we found that urban farms has the ability to create intergeneration bonding between the elderly and the young people working on the farm. There's social cohesion, and sharing a meal together on the farm and sharing knowledge is something that will help a lot of these elderly come out from social isolation. And we have seen activities and tasks on the farm that we get the elderly and the kids and the young people to do actually has a therapeutic benefit to their mental wellness. And this was done in a series of studies with the National University of Singapore and the National Parks Board to really look at the idea of horticulture therapy using urban farms as a place to deliver them. And we have seen that through a series of activities on the farm, many of these respondents or these participants had a reduction in their stress markers pre and post intervention. So these stress markers then contributes to inflammation in the body, for example. And these healthcare outcomes could really shift the way we look at urban farms and the role they play in the city, and to really change it to a place of care. Because when we talk about a holistic approach to well-being, it is not just the food we eat, but also the mental stimulation, the community element to bring people together. And urban farms has that ability to achieve that. I want to share a final quote from Masanobu Fukuoka, who is an agriculture philosophist from Japan. The ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings. And this is exactly what we are trying to remodel in the urban spaces. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bjorn. Thank you so much for this inspiring session. And just a very simple takeaway from me, a very simple urban farming concept can have so many positive multiplier effects if you can just look beyond the obvious. And right now, okay, we have a few questions from the floor. Let's take a look. Okay, let's take the first one. With such heavy real estate pressures on land, especially in Singapore, what else can policymakers do to help urban farming? What are your thoughts, Bjorn?
Singapore is really in a very unique position as a very green and very green landscaped garden city. So a lot of the early day policies on green roofs, for example, vertical greenery, are already in place. So a lot of this is a low-hanging fruit for us to convert a lot of these rooftop gardens, which may not have any immediate economic value, to really transform that into productive spaces where the community can come and participate in. And this policy, of course, is quite unique to Singapore. In other countries would be a little bit more challenging because there's a lot of infrastructure cost that needs to go to developing rooftop farms and rooftop gardens as well. So I think when the sort of environment starts to shift in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see a lot more urban farms coming up in play when you see more disruption in supply chain, because these farms will then provide the immediate sustenance of crops that are highly perishable, like green leafy vegetables, to the community, to supply it to the community, while a lot of the longer fruiting vegetables or things that needs a longer time to grow can be sort of relocated into the peri-urban areas. So there's always a challenge between the economic value of urban farms and sort of property development. But we have found a model that is balanced, where it's not only about food production, there's also community activities and engagement, And we found that creates actually quite a good balance for urban farms. And of course, with the healthcare angle that we are moving into, that we're opening up a whole different industry or into a whole different industry here.
Thank you. And let's take a look at the second curious questions that we have. How do you simulate the closed loop systems that you mentioned earlier in these urban farming environments, and how much training is required for communities?
Yep. So when we developed our first farm, so in collaboration with the Singapore government, we took a conscious effort to create a closed loop farm. And the idea is, could we deal with the food waste issues within the city itself? And so we actually created one of the first black soldier fly farm within our farming system at Queenstown in Singapore, where we took in food waste and we converted that into organic fertilizer that goes back into our farming systems that then grows food for the community and also for industry as well. And this then is modeled and open for visitation by the community through various workshops, through various tours and learning journeys with schools to really sort of teach them about the idea of closed loop farming and how that could be applied to themselves at home. So the training is really a hands-on thing for them to really play around with the soil, planting seedlings and, dealing with their food waste. But a lot of the urban farmers that joined our team all had no agriculture background, because in Singapore, you cannot go to school and learn about agriculture. It's not available at this point. So they come in with no background with agriculture, but they learn on the job, and it takes a few years to really kind of connect with the land, the space, the environment, and they have all become really good farmers. Yep.
Thank you. We only have time for one last question, and we'll pick the slightly tricky one. Any plans to go beyond Southeast Asia, Bjorn?
Well, so it's always a hope that this can spread towards the other regions. And collectively, I've met many urban farmers from all around the world. And many of us have this similar idea of what a sustainable, community-focused urban farm can be. For us, it's not really about setting up Edible Garden City in Jakarta or in Seoul, but for us, it's really to open source our model so that people can learn from the mistakes that we made and from maybe some of the successes that we have. But the thing is, the successes that we have within Singapore can be very specific to Singapore and may not fit immediately into Jakarta, for example. So it's really creating this open platform of sharing and collaboration and open sourcing our learnings is how we hope to kind of push this this notion of this community supported urban farming to the world.
Thank you, Bjorn. I'm afraid, again, this is all we have time for. And please check out Edible Garden City website. And if you have more questions for Bjorn, you can write to the team or connect with Bjorn on LinkedIn or write directly to us, sustainacity@archi.sg. So now everybody, teams, let's give Bjorn a huge round of virtual applause. Thank you, Bjorn. Thank you for the very inspiring session. Okay, now everybody, let's go for a 5 minutes break. And when we return, Coach Danan will take you through the rapid prototyping process. Okay, let's go and get freshen up. See you in a bit.